My wife said, "I'm going away for a few days. Don't wait for me." I replied, "Okay." No questions, no calls. On day 4, I checked something she forgot existed. When I saw the name attached to her booking, I understood why she didn't want me to ask. Some secrets don't stay buried. They surface on their own when you stop looking and start seeing. Subscribe to Voxa Stories right now, because what comes next is the part nobody talks about. I'm 33 years old and I'm sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a laptop open in front of me and a cup of tea that went cold 40 minutes ago that I keep picking up and setting back down without drinking, and I'm looking at a name on a screen that has rearranged everything I thought I understood about the last 9 months of my life. Not everything. Longer than that, if I'm being honest with myself, which I'm trying to be, finally at 2 in the morning. With the cold tea and the name on the screen and the specific irreversible quality of information that cannot be unseen once it has been seen. My wife is 4 days into a trip she told me she needed to take alone. She said she needed space to think. She said she'd been feeling overwhelmed and that a few days away would help her reset. She said with a specific deliberate gentleness that I now understand was the gentleness of someone managing a situation rather than sharing one. "Don't wait for me. I'll be back when I'm back." She kissed me on the cheek, not the mouth, which I noticed and filed without knowing what to do with, and she rolled her suitcase to the car and she drove away. I said, "Okay." No questions, no calls after, because that's what she asked for, and because I am the kind of person who takes people at their word, and because somewhere in the part of me that knows things before I'm ready to know them, I understood that questions would produce answers I wasn't ready to receive in the driveway on a Tuesday morning. I waited 4 days. I didn't track her, didn't call, checked my phone with the particular discipline of someone who has decided not to do something and is holding to that decision through will rather than ease. I worked, I ate. I maintained the ordinary shape of daily life in a house that felt different when she wasn't in it, and not different in the way that comes from love and presence and missing someone, different in the way that comes from a silence that is too complete, a quiet that has the quality of relief rather than absence. Day 4, I found it entirely by accident, which is the thing I keep coming back to. I wasn't looking. I was trying to locate an old receipt for a home appliance that was under warranty, something I'd been meaning to deal with for weeks and had finally gotten around to. We shared a family email account for household things, utilities, subscriptions, service warranties, the administrative layer of a shared life. I logged in to search for the receipt and I found it in 40 seconds. Then I saw the other email. 4 days old from a hotel booking confirmation, her name in the subject line. A property I didn't recognize in a location 3 hours from here. I opened it the way you do things that you already know are going to change something, with a steadiness that is not calm, but is the thing your body does when it understands that this moment requires it. The booking was for 2 guests, her name listed first. The second name was a man I will refer to only as someone I knew, which is all the specificity this story needs and more than I want to give him. I sat with the screen for a very long time. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator cycled. Outside, a car passed on the street, its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling through the window. And then the dark came back, and the screen stayed the same, and the name stayed. The same, and nothing about the information changed with additional looking. Let me tell you who I was 9 months ago, because this story doesn't make sense without that baseline. 9 months ago, I was a person who would have described his marriage as good. Not perfect. I don't think I've been naive enough to use that word about anything in my adult life, but solid, built on a real foundation of genuine affection and complementary rhythms and the specific comfort that comes from having chosen someone and had them choose you back, and from the daily evidence of that choice in the texture of ordinary life. We'd been married 4 years, together for 2 before that. 6 years of accumulated history, shared language, the particular intimacy of knowing someone's sleep schedule and their coffee order, and the exact way they laugh when something catches them off guard. I'd been aware, in the peripheral way you're aware of things you're not ready to examine, that something had changed in the last several months. Not dramatically. She hadn't stopped being present or kind or functional within the architecture of our life together. What changed was something more like a direction. The way a compass needle shifts a few degrees. The instrument looks the same, the case looks the same, the needle looks the same, but where it's pointing has moved, and if you don't check it against a landmark, you might not notice until you're meaningfully off course. I'd checked it against a few landmarks and gotten readings I hadn't fully processed. She started being vague about her schedule in a new way, not secretive in a dramatic sense, vague with the smooth, practiced quality of someone who has become accustomed to providing enough information to prevent questions without providing enough to constitute an honest account. She mentioned a colleague in work conversations with a frequency that established casual normalcy, the same technique I've described in other versions of this kind of story, because people use it for the same reason people use any technique that works, which is that it works. I'd noticed the frequency. I'd noted it and moved past it because noting it felt like the beginning of a thing I didn't want to begin. The last notable moment before the trip was a dinner party at a friend's house, 3 weeks prior. 11 people, good food, the kind of easy social evening that usually lands well. She was animated in a way I'd been missing at home. Present, funny, warm, the version of herself I'd fallen in love with operating at full wattage. I'd thought, something's better. Whatever was off has shifted. I'd been grateful without examining what exactly I was grateful for. Toward the end of the evening, loading coats in the hallway, I overheard her on the phone. Not the content, just the tone. The specific warm private register I recognized as the one she used with her closest people. The tone that means the conversation is one she'd chosen rather than one she was managing. She finished the call before I reached her and put her phone away and smiled at me with the bright completeness of someone who has just closed a window. I said nothing. We drove home. We went to bed. 3 weeks later, she told me she was going away for a few days. Now it's 2 a.m, and I'm looking at the name on the screen, and I'm building the complete picture from its constituent parts with the terrible clarity that arrives when you've been partially avoiding something for long enough that the full version lands with compounded force. Here is what I did not do. I did not close the laptop, did not minimize the window, did not pour the cold tea down the drain and go to bed and wait for her to come home and pretend I hadn't seen it. I have done versions of that in smaller situations throughout my life, and I know exactly what it costs, which is the ongoing price of living inside a lie that someone else is telling you, paid daily in the currency of your own discomfort. I took a screenshot. I noted the booking details, the property, the dates, the names, the confirmation number. I forwarded the email to my personal account, the one that exists outside our shared household infrastructure. Then I opened another tab and I spent 45 minutes doing the quiet, methodical work of understanding my position. The house we own together, both names on the mortgage, which I'd been making slightly more than half of the payments on for 2 years since her income had shifted. The joint accounts, which I'd been the primary contributor to for the same period. The car she was currently driving to a hotel 3 hours away, in my name, though she used it more than I did and had for the past year, an arrangement that had evolved gradually and never been formally discussed. A trip. We'd booked for the following spring, deposits in my name, her name on the itinerary, my card on the confirmation. I looked at that list with the same clean, unsentimentalized attention I'd been trying to develop since the screen showed me what it showed me. Then I started making decisions. The spring trip, I logged into the booking platform and I canceled her addition to the reservation. Not the whole trip, just her place on it. The deposit was mine, and canceling the whole reservation would have cost me a financial penalty I wasn't going to absorb on her behalf. I removed her name, adjusted the booking to single occupancy, and the system confirmed the change. 60 seconds. The car insurance. Her name was listed on the policy as a secondary driver on a vehicle I owned. Not something I could change in the middle of the night, but something I noted on a list in a document I opened and titled, plainly, Things to Handle. The list grew over the next 2 hours as I worked through the practical infrastructure of a 6-year shared life with the systematic attention of someone who has accepted that the infrastructure is going to need to be disassembled. Joint account. I couldn't and wouldn't drain it. That would be both legally problematic and genuinely wrong. What I could do was contact my bank in the morning and establish what the process looked like for account separation, which I noted. My financial advisor, whom I called the next morning before she was due back. A brief, careful conversation that confirmed my understanding of what was mine, what was ours, and what the separation process would look like if it came to that. The attorney, I found one through a professional reference, sent an email at 6 in the morning requesting an initial consultation, received a response by 9 confirming an appointment for the following day. I disclosed nothing in the email except that I needed to understand my position in a situation involving a marital asset question. Neutral language. Documented. Then I waited. Not passively, actively, in the specific way of someone who has completed their preparation and is now simply holding the space until the next necessary thing. She came home on day 5, mid-afternoon. I heard the car in the driveway, heard the key in the lock, heard the particular sound of her re-entry, the suitcase wheels on the entryway floor, the specific sequence of sounds that had been the soundtrack of her homecomings for 6 years and that now landed in my chest with a completely different quality. I was in the living room, reading, or appearing to read. She came in with the slightly careful energy of someone returning from something they're managing the re-entry from, warm but gauged, checking the room before committing to a register. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. "Good trip?" "Yeah, I feel better, more reset." "Good." I set down the book. "Can we talk?" The gauge recalibrated immediately. I watched her make a decision about her expression. "Sure, let me just..." She gestured at the suitcase. "Leave it. Sit down." She sat. The afternoon light was the flat, even kind of overcast daylight that makes everything look as it is rather than better than it is. She was in the armchair and I was on the couch and the room was very quiet. "I found the booking confirmation," I said, "in the household email, 4 days ago." The stillness that followed had a physical quality, like a change in atmospheric pressure. "I wasn't looking for it," I continued. "I was looking for an appliance receipt. I opened the email because it had your name in the subject line, and I thought it might be something we needed for the records. I saw the property, I saw the dates, I saw the second name on the reservation." She looked at me, then at her hands, then back at me. The expression on her face was the specific expression of someone who has been running a calculation for a long time and has just been informed that the variable they were calculating around was never a variable. "How long have you known?" I said. "It's not..." She stopped. "It's complicated." "How long?" 7 months, she said, quietly, with the exhausted honesty of someone who has just set down something very heavy. 7 months. I ran that backward through the 9 months of off-compass readings, the frequency of the colleague's name, the dinner party phone call, the kiss on the cheek in the driveway. "The colleague," I said. She nodded. "The trip." I needed to think about what I wanted. While sharing a hotel room with him, she didn't answer that one. The silence was its own answer. What followed over the next 2 hours was the kind of conversation that is exhausting, not because it's loud, but because it requires total presence. She cycled through the familiar phases. Context building, the marriage's shortcomings as contributing factors, not an excuse but an explanation. She needed me to understand what had been missing. I listened to all of it with the steady attention I give to things that matter, hearing the real grief in it alongside the self-justification, accepting both as genuine without allowing the first to rehabilitate the second. "What do you want to do?" I said when she'd finished. She looked at me with the expression I'd been seeing in fragments for 9 months and was now seeing whole. "I don't know." "I need you to know," I said. "Not tonight, but soon. Because I've had 4 days to sit with this, and I know what I'm not willing to go back to. And what I'm not willing to go back to is something that looks like a marriage and runs like a performance. I'd rather have something honest, even if the honest thing is that it's over, than have something managed." She stayed in the guest room that night. I slept better than I expected. In the morning she came downstairs and we had coffee at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat 4 nights ago with the laptop and the cold tea, and she told me she'd ended it the previous evening, by phone, and that she wanted to try to rebuild. I told her I'd heard her and that I needed time to decide whether rebuilding was something I was capable of. and that I needed complete honesty going forward as a non-negotiable baseline, and that the architecture we'd built that had allowed 7 months of this to exist was going to have to be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. She said she understood. I canceled the attorney appointment. Not permanently. I noted the contact and kept it available. But I canceled the immediate consultation because the situation had shifted into a phase where legal preparation was premature, and the conversation was still possible. The spring trip I did not reinstate her on, not out of cruelty, out of the understanding that I needed the concrete evidence of my own agency in this situation, at least for a while. Something that was mine, that was visibly mine, unreservedly, without negotiation or management. She could come on the trip eventually, if we got to eventually. But the booking was mine, and it was going to stay mine. The car insurance I updated on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later. Her name removed as a secondary driver. She got her own policy, her own coverage, her own documented relationship with the vehicle she used daily. A small thing, the right kind of small thing. We are, as of the time of this writing, in the specific uncertain territory that exists between a wound and a scar. Some days the honest effort is visible. Some days I look at her across the kitchen table and feel the geography of 7 months arranged behind my eyes like a map I didn't ask for and can't unfold. We're in what I'd call a conditional present. Present for now. Conditional on things that are still revealing themselves. I still have the screenshot. I haven't looked at it since the night I took it. I haven't deleted it either. It lives in a folder in my personal account, named with the date, and I think it will stay there for a long time. Not as a weapon, not as evidence, just as the documentation of the night I stopped being managed and started seeing clearly. That's what night 4 actually was. Not the betrayal. That was months earlier and had its own date. Night 4 was the night the information found me, and I had the presence of mind to look at it directly and then do something with what I saw. I keep coming back to the cold tea, the way I kept picking it up and setting it back down. The body's automatic return to ordinary comfort in the middle of extraordinary information. There's something in that small, repeated gesture that feels like the whole story. You keep reaching for the thing that was normal. You keep finding it cold. Eventually, you make a fresh cup, or you don't. But you stop pretending the cold one will do. Here's what I need to know from you. Have you ever found out something you weren't looking for? Something that reordered everything you thought was stable? How did you handle the first hour? Tell me below because I think your answer matters more than you know. Edit. The comments are divided on whether I should have confronted her the night I found the booking versus waiting until she came home. Let me explain the decision precisely. Confronting her remotely, by phone, by text, while she was 3 hours away in a hotel, would have given her the ability to manage the conversation from a distance, to prepare, to construct the re-entry narrative on her own terms. By waiting until she was home, sitting in the same room, in the same light, I made sure the conversation happened without that buffer. She couldn't manage the room she was physically in. She couldn't manage my face. Some conversations require presence, to be honest, and this was one of them. The 4 days of waiting weren't passivity. They were preparation and positioning. There is a difference. Edit 2. Someone asked whether the attorney consultation would have changed anything if I'd kept it. Honestly, yes and no. What it would have changed is my information base, which is always worth having. What it wouldn't have changed is the conversation, because the conversation wasn't about legal strategy. It was about two people sitting in a room and deciding whether the thing between them was still real enough to do the work. The attorney's number is still in my phone. I think it will stay there for the same reason the screenshot stays in the folder. Not because I plan to use it, because knowing it's there reminds me that I have options. And having options is the difference between choosing to stay and being unable to leave. That difference matters more than anything else about where I am right now. If this story stayed with you after you finished reading, don't leave without dropping a comment. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what you would have done differently. I read every single one, and this thread is only getting more real from here.